You're about to learn how to actually win more matches in pickleball. We cover a lot of tips on our channel, and all of that is incredibly important, but when it comes to outright winning, being the point leader is all that matters.
So let's break down the 3 ways that you can win more points yourself and the 3 ways that you can force your opponents to lose more points. Let's get to it.
You'd be shocked how many points in pickleball are lost on the first 2 shots alone. It may sound crazy, but getting your serves and returns in is literally the fastest way to win more matches in pickleball. So let's break down how to do that more effectively. The first step to improving your serve and making it more consistent every time is to add a solid routine to your serve. So instead of just going up there and hitting a serve after calling the score, let's make it a little bit more consistent. Everyone will have a different variation of a routine, so it's up to you to decide what fits you best. For me, I'll give you an example of what I like to do for my serves. So step 1 is I call the score. Always call the score first because that's going to start your routine. And if you mess up the score or say it wrong, then you know to start your routine back over. So my favorite routine is like this. I call the score 1-1-1, and then I bounce the ball twice. I get low, pick my target destination, visualize it, and then serve. So that's my routine, but let's show you Shay's, which might be a little bit different, and show you another option.
My routine is pretty similar. The very first thing, always call the score 1-1-1, 1-1-2. The next thing I usually do is make sure I'm about 1 step off of this line. So just check your positioning. From here, I'll get a wider stance, more open. I don't bounce the ball like Caleb does. I go straight to the ball, look up at my target location and my opponent. And then from this point on, I only stare at the ball. Here, wide backswing, and then come through and serve.
The reason we do a routine is to eliminate variables in your serve. If you're doing the same thing consistently every time before you serve, there's just less that can go wrong. So that helps your consistency dramatically. Even though it sounds easy, it's actually a really important step to your serve. When you're starting out serving, there's an important spot to aim that's going to be the absolute most consistent. And that's just quite literally the middle of the court. The reason this is the best spot to pick rather than, as most beginners are taught, the back line or closer to the front even for angles, is because this spot here has the most margin of any spot in the entire box. You've got 15 feet lengthwise going to either side, and you've got 10 feet wide to miss from. So if you were to hit in the dead middle, you've got 5 feet of space of margin to go from on either side of this shot. And then you've also got 7.5 feet of space on the front and the back of that same center shot. So if you just want to get your serve in, which is not a bad idea, literally aim for the middle of the box. Another great way to add more consistency to your serves is to literally just go for less power. There's no reason to boom the ball in pickleball on your serve, especially when you're starting out, because serves are not designed in pickleball to win the point. They're just designed to start the point. So go for consistency, don't go for power. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see beginners make when they're learning the sport. But just because you're consistent doesn't mean you can't aim for good targets. Instead of going for raw power and trying to outpower your opponent, aim for spots that can make your opponent cause errors themselves. So my favorite is the 3 Bs. I like to aim at the body, the backhand, or that spot in between, which makes them make a decision and move on the court. So those are my favorite options that are going to force errors out of your opponent while not sacrificing consistency on your end. When you are aiming for those 3 targets I mentioned, there's one thing to keep in mind. Aim small, miss small. I'm sure you've heard that before, but let me explain my favorite way to apply that in pickleball. Instead of aiming for the big targets like this whole entire corner or the middle of the box or even the side, aim for something so much smaller like your opponent's foot or even their toe. That way, when you do miss just a little bit, you're going to miss smaller rather than missing a giant target. So let's give you examples on the 3 targets that I already mentioned. When you're aiming for the body, aim right for the middle of their feet. That way, if you miss slightly, you're still getting that body target, even if you aren't perfect with your accuracy. So step 1 is aim towards the body. Step 2 is aim towards the backhand. This is going to be any shot past their left foot. So we want to get them hitting a backhand after that. I would aim specifically for the space right next to their left foot. This is where I would aim, and then you would have a little bit of margin that's still going to hit to their backhand after you aim there. And beyond that, one of my favorite targets is the spot in between. So you can aim for their backhand over here, but you can also aim for this area right on their left foot that forces them to make a decision. They can either move and hit a backhand, or they can go around the ball and hit a forehand. So when a ball lands right here, there's almost no shot that's effective that they can get it over the net while hitting the ball standing still. That's why I really like that shot, because it forces your opponent to move and make a decision, and typically that just leads to more errors. Another great thing about the between spot is it also ruins their momentum going forward to the kitchen. So if they're forced to all of a sudden sidestep and hit a forehand, that's momentum they have to carry now left and then go forward to the kitchen after the return, rather than if you hit a ball right at them that they don't have to move for. Or if they choose the other option to go for their backhand, they have to move to the right, which once again forces their momentum to the right and makes their approach to the kitchen slower and often less effective. So we obviously just talked a lot about serves and how to never miss them, but there's the other side of that coin, which is returns, which is the second most missed shot in pickleball. So we have to nail this. One of the best ways to improve your returns and be more consistent is to split step before the ball even comes over the net. The reason you split step is at first it gets you balanced, which means you're more stable with any shot, but it also gives you the chance to move in any direction quickly to hit your balls more consistently and with better speed. When you're returning, it's important to be behind the baseline because that gives you the most amount of time to react to the serve coming over the net. And then the next thing you want to do is split step. So spread your feet apart and get low. Do this as soon as your opponent is making contact with the ball, because you're going to have to get low to return the ball anyways, and this gets you more prepared and more stable for any shot that comes your way. It also allows for explosive movement right after a split step. So if a return comes out wide, I can now shuffle to the right, stay stable, and make solid contact without having to move my body as much. Whereas if I was standing up straight, I have to now get low to that ball and do a lunge rather than already being low with a split step. Another great tip to improve your consistency with a return is to shorten your backswing. A lot of tennis players, or really just any player, prefer to do these big motions to get the most power out of their swing. But in pickleball, you don't have a lot of court to work with, and that takes away time that you have to react to the ball coming your way. So instead of these giant backswings that lose you time, I want you to move your paddle just a little bit backwards and then brush up on the ball. So it's gonna look like this rather than this. That saves you a lot of time to read the ball and still creates an effective return that's more consistent. And speaking of consistent returns, let's talk about what you should be going for when you return the ball. So we talked about that short backswing, but where should you be aiming? What kind of shot are you trying to hit? It's actually really simple. You're trying to hit a deep arcing ball that rolls over the net and buys time for you to get to the kitchen line. So your goal with every return is to get right here. That's it. It's not to win the ball immediately after you get a serve. It's just to get to the kitchen line and then dominate the court. This is where your offense happens, not on the return. So when you are returning with that short backswing, where should you be aiming? If you're a beginner, I really just recommend aim for the middle of the court. I'm talking like right here, because this once again gives you the absolute most margin. If you hit the ball a bit, or if you don't hit it perfectly, the ball is probably going to stay in. If you're a bit more advanced and you have better ball control, we want to just be going for depth. Step one is to go towards the middle again. This again has the widest margin to the sides. And the reason we want to go deep is because it buys you time to get up to the kitchen line. So go for a return with plenty of margin over the net that allows you to get forward all the way to the kitchen line. The priority with returns is not to win the point outright, but to buy you time to get to the kitchen and then take offense. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people trying to win the point off of a return rather than just using it as a tool to get to the kitchen line.
Right after the serve and return, the next most missed shot in pickleball is the third shot. Here are some ways to make your third shots not only more consistent, but more effective. So remember, the serve is the first shot, the return is the second shot, and now it's up to me to hit the third shot. And the main mistake that happens here is not choosing the correct type of third shot to hit. So here's a simple rule of thumb that will make sure that you hit the correct shot every single time. All you have to do is just look at this baseline. If you're hitting a third shot from behind this baseline, the most consistent thing to do is to drive from this position. So when I say drive, I mean hit the ball relatively hard and make sure it gets decently over the net. If you try to hit a perfectly accurate shot from here, there's a lot of room for margin and you might mess up. So instead, go for the safe option and just drive anytime the ball is behind this line. If you try to hit a perfectly accurate shot from back here, there's a lot of room for error and you might miss that shot. Whenever the ball lands in front of this line, that's a good time to hit a really well-placed third shot drop. The only time I would not recommend hitting a drop when the ball lands in front of this line is a ball that hits the ground and then bounces up super high. If that ball is bouncing up super high, it's a great opportunity for you to drive even if you're in front of this line. And that's because the margin of error gets higher here because you can start to hit flat or even down on the ball and not have to worry about this ball going over the net. Because when we're driving from inside of the court, if I hit the ball hard when it's low, I have to clear the net, which means I have to hit up. And when I hit the ball up with a lot of power, it usually will go out. So now let's talk about where to actually aim our drops. So remember, ball's inside of the court, I wanna hit a drop shot, but where do I hit it? The most consistent place to hit this shot is about 3/4 of the way from the middle of the court to the sideline. So somewhere right around this area. The reason why, there's actually 3 reasons. Number 1, the net is 2 inches lower in the middle than it is at the very, very edge of it. So if I aim super close to the edge of the court, I have to clear 2 extra inches of net to get my ball to go across it, and that usually leaves the ball high and lets my opponent take it out of the air. Instead, if you aim somewhere around the middle to about 3/4 of the way over, you're dealing with less net height, so you can hit balls that have more margin and are safer. The second reason to hit your third shot here is to avoid hitting shots that get way too close to the sideline. This is dangerous for a couple of reasons. If you hit the ball too close to the sideline, very often you might just miss it wide. Or if you're playing an advanced opponent, any ball that goes close to the sideline with a little bit of height is an easy earning opportunity and will usually just lose you the point right away. And the final reason to aim in this exact spot is because it decreases the amount of angles that your opponent has. If I aim my drops all the way to the sideline, my opponent can hit a hard cross-court shot, they can hit a hard middle shot, they can hit a hard down the line shot. They have any opportunity that they want to put pressure on me and my partner and make our lives more difficult. But if I aim 3/4 of the way between the midline and the sideline, now if they try to hit a really aggressive shot wide, it's going to go out. So the most likely place they're going to hit the ball is back towards the middle of the court. And if they hit it to the edges of the court, they're usually going to hit it with less pace, which makes it easier to defend. So now let's talk about the drive. So remember, if that ball's landing behind the baseline, usually you want to drive, but there's a very specific spot to aim your drives at. Let's talk about it. The number 1 thing to remember is to give your drives plenty of margin over the net. Very often people try to aim their drives super low to the net and win the point right away, but the problem is if you hit the net, you just immediately lose the point. So instead, let's focus on where we aim our drives to give ourselves the best opportunity of winning the rally. The best spot to aim your drives is at your opponent's right rib, right shoulder, right hip, somewhere in this area. So usually your opponents are using a continental grip, and this area of their body is super awkward to defend, and if they do defend it, it usually just dribbles back over the net and is not very aggressive towards you. However, if I aim at their left side of their body, their backhand's super strong and he can punch that ball back at me very aggressively, and then my next shot is more difficult as a result. And the final tip on your drives is to make sure that you're not trying to win the point, but you're just setting up a 5th shot that is easier to hit. So all we're looking for here is just a shot that comes back to us with less pace that we can then take inside of the court and hit a drop shot so we can finally approach the kitchen, get into a dink rally, construct a point, and then eventually win it.
Now that we've shown you the best ways to start points consistently, let's cover the big way to reduce errors in the middle of a rally. And that all comes down to your footwork. The first big way to improve your footwork throughout the entire match is to work on split stepping. Split stepping is when you spread your feet apart and get low. The reason you do this, just like we talked about on the return, is it allows you to, 1, already be prepped low to hit the ball with a more stable motion and with more margin, but also to create that explosive movement that lets you travel the court faster and ultimately make less errors because you're not having to run as hard to get to the ball. The biggest question we get about split stepping is knowing when to split step. A lot of people know that they should get low to prepare for the ball, but they don't know when to do it. The time to split step is right before your opponent makes contact with the ball. The reason we want to split step before they make contact is because it takes time for your body to lower and actually get ready for the ball. So if we do that when your opponent already makes contact, we lose that time to actually get low and prepare. So right before your opponent hits the ball, split step, and that allows you to adapt to the ball that they strike. So that's how and when to split step, but what should you do after you get to this position, and what are the explosive movements I'm talking about? We're mostly referring to shuffling. Shuffling is when you bring your right foot over to your left foot or your left foot over to your right foot to do a solid low movement. This allows you to get to the ball without compromising that lower position that would take time to get to normally, and allows you to be more stable when you make contact with the shot. So you're going to split step, and then you're going to shuffle to your destination. Now, after you shuffle and get to your destination, if you need to make a quick movement to get a ball, we're going to pivot. Pivoting is when you pivot off of your outside foot, take a step, make the shot, and then get back. This is the fastest way to cover ground in pickleball, so make sure you have that movement in your back pocket. That's one of the biggest additions to shuffling, so try to learn it. But in pickleball, there are even scenarios where you don't have time to pivot, so you've got to do something called reaching. Reaching is after you've split stepped, you leave one foot planted and you let the other one go out wide to improve your reach to get to a ball. You would do this when a ball is coming really fast your way, and you absolutely have to get it in order to save the point. The reason we don't recommend this over pivoting or shuffling when possible is because ultimately this is less stable and a lot harder to make a solid shot or contact from. But the key here for all of the movements we just taught you, which will up your consistency, is it all starts with the split step. So if you're not split stepping, you can't do any of these movements, and that's why footwork is so important, especially split stepping right before your opponent makes contact with the ball.
So now that you know how to use your footwork effectively to win more points, there's a couple of ways we can use these same techniques to win more points and force errors from our opponents. So the number one thing you can do is just recognize if your opponents aren't split stepping. If they aren't split stepping, there's a simple way to take advantage of it. And that is anytime that they are back in the court and they start to move forward, always hit the ball at them. As they're moving forward, if they're going straight ahead, they don't have control over their shots. And so the shot that they hit will usually pop up or just not be effective. So to take advantage of that, hit a ball with a decent amount of pace towards their body and just see what they do. Usually they're going to make a mistake. The second way to take advantage of an opponent who doesn't split step is to hit short angles away from their body. If they're moving forward, they usually can't stop and get to a ball that goes behind them in either direction. So this might just win you the point immediately. So we talked about the 3 good types of footwork, but there's one type that everybody does that's not effective, and you can use this to your advantage. Anytime someone is moving to one direction, very often they'll take their outside foot and move it the opposite direction first to plant and then go in that direction. Very often you see this on the forehand side, but you also see it on the backhand side, where someone's trying to get a ball to their backhand, they move their outside foot in, and then they step across. What they've essentially done here is take an extra step to move nowhere. So right now I can reach here, and when I take a step in and then push my body over, I'm still only reaching here. I didn't gain any ground there. So if you ever see your opponents have a tendency to do this on their backhand or their forehand, that's a great place to aim every shot you hit. So when you're in a dink rally and you notice they do this on their backhand, hit most of your shots to their backhand, force them to move, you take away time from them, and usually they'll pop up the ball as a result. But you can also use this in the mid-court whenever they're trying to hit resets and drops from here. If they're situated here and you hit a ball to their left, they'll probably waste time by making this movement to get to their left. And the same thing applies on their returns. If you've noticed they make this movement on their backhand and they're situated here to return, just aim to their backhand, watch them make this inefficient movement, and then give yourself more time as a result. And all these tiny little things that we've taught you over the course of an entire match will force you to win more points than your opponents and will ultimately win you more games.
And if you liked this video, please consider subscribing. Most of you guys are actually not subscribed, so it would mean the world to us if you just press that button. And if you want to keep watching even more pickleball stuff, maybe watch this video. It's gonna make you so good, so much better, actually.